I was standing in my sister's kitchen, the air thick with the stale scent of burnt coffee and resentment, when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but the trustee's voice on the other end was unmistakable, measured, professional, almost too calm for what he was about to say. He asked, "Mrs. Hollander, are you in a place where you can speak privately?" My stomach tightened. Nothing good begins with that question. My family had been tearing itself apart for 3 weeks over my late mother's estate. 3 weeks of accusations, raised voices, sudden silences, and the glint of old jealousy resurfacing like rust under chipped paint. I had come only to keep the peace, though peace was nowhere to be found. My siblings had grown so consumed by imagined injustices that they couldn't see straight, let alone grieve. They fought over jewelry they hadn't worn, property they hadn't visited, money they hadn't earned. I stayed mostly quiet, observing the storm around me while wondering how grief could transform once loving faces into masks of suspicion. And then the phone call. "Mrs. Hollander," the trustee said again, "I need to inform you that a second will has come to light." The room froze. My sister stopped mid-sentence. My brother's shoulders stiffened as if the words had pinned him in place. No one spoke, but I felt every thought ricocheting behind their eyes. A second will. My mother had been organized, detailed, methodical. She kept her finances in labeled folders, her documents in fireproof boxes, her intentions clear. A second will made no sense, unless she had known something we didn't. Unless she had felt something we'd ignored. I stepped outside onto the small porch so the trustee could continue. The door shut behind me, but not the tension. It seeped through the walls. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn, and for a moment it felt like I was standing at the edge of a truth that would upend our lives. "This will," the trustee went on, "was placed in a sealed envelope and addressed specifically to you. Its instructions differ substantially from the version your siblings have reviewed." My heart slowed, then quickened. A strange duality of fear and clarity. "What does it say?" I asked. "I legally cannot disclose its contents until all parties are present," he replied. "But Mrs. Hollander, the implications are significant." A gust of wind moved across the yard, lifting the edges of the porch rug and carrying with it the faint scent of pine and damp soil. I felt my mother in that breeze, or perhaps I simply wanted to. I sensed a message buried beneath the trustee's formality, something urgent, something she had tried to communicate even after death. When I stepped back inside, my siblings stared at me with a mix of confusion and distrust. "Well?" my brother demanded. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because for the first time since her passing, I felt something settle in my bones. Not grief, not fear, but conviction. Whatever my mother had written in that second will, she had written it for a reason. And I intended to honor it, even if it meant standing alone in a war I didn't start. But none of us knew then, none of us could have known, how deep that second will reached, or how many secrets it would drag to the surface, or how quietly the truth would dismantle every lie they'd built their claims upon. And this, I suppose, is where my story truly begins. A mother's final word. A family's unraveling. And a reckoning decades overdue. My name is Eleanor Hollander, and I am 63 years old. Old enough to have known heartbreak, young enough to chase what peace remains. I have lived a life built on steadiness, teaching literature for over 30 years, raising 2 children on a teacher's salary, learning that dignity often grows in the quiet moments after disappointment. I have never been one for chaos. Perhaps that's why my siblings mistook my calm for weakness. I grew up the eldest of 3. My brother Daniel, 2 years younger, built his life on ambition. Real estate ventures, high-risk investments, the kind of swagger that comes with never admitting fear. My sister Caroline, the youngest, moved through life on charm and small crises. I learned early that being the eldest didn't mean being the strongest. It simply meant being the most responsible. Our mother, Margaret Hollander, was a woman shaped by sharp pragmatism and deep emotion, though the latter she kept tucked away like good silver. She survived our father's early death with a resilience that both inspired and intimidated us. Perhaps she trusted me the most, though she rarely said so aloud. Instead, she expressed her faith through quiet gestures, handing me the house keys at 16, asking my opinion on financial decisions, confiding in me when she feared age was catching up to her. I never expected that trust to become a battleground. Until her estate turned into one. Standing in my sister's kitchen that day, I was painfully aware that family fractures don't erupt, they reveal themselves. And ours had been cracked for years. My siblings looked at me as though I were a threat for receiving that call, as though I had orchestrated the existence of a second will through sheer willpower. I wanted to tell them it frightened me too, that I didn't want to be singled out, that I only ever wanted fairness. But words like that fall unheard when people are hungry for inheritance. I returned home that evening, the trustee's voice looping through my thoughts. A second will. Addressed to me. My mother's handwriting. A message withheld. I sat at my kitchen table long after dark, hands wrapped around a mug of tea I never drank. The silence in my home felt different. Charged, expectant. Like my mother was waiting for me to stop grieving and start listening. Grief, I've learned, softens some people and hardens others. It did both to me. I spent the next 2 days thinking of my mother, not as the woman whose estate was being dissected, but as the woman who had shaped me. She had once told me, during a walk through the botanical gardens, that justice is rarely about punishment. It's about truth finding the courage to speak, she had said. I didn't understand it then. I do now. When I met with the trustee 3 days after his call, I felt steadier. Not fearless, but anchored. The envelope he handed me was small, sealed, and unmistakably marked in her script. My name. Not my siblings. Mine. Written with a deliberate hand. Inside that envelope, beyond the legal language and the formal tone, I would soon discover the beginning of everything. Every betrayal, every lie, and every choice that would lead me toward the quiet, inevitable act of reclaiming what was mine. And what she wanted me to have. But that is still ahead in this story. For now, all you need to know is that I opened that envelope knowing I was no longer just her eldest daughter. I was the keeper of her final truth. My family's fractures began long before the estate disputes. They were subtle at first, woven into small behaviors we glossed over. Daniel learned early that charm could excuse irresponsibility. Caroline discovered that tears could prevent accountability. And I was groomed by circumstance, by birth order, by temperament, to clean up behind them. Mother was aware of our dynamics, though she seldom intervened. She believed children grew into their patterns, that forcing change only hardened resistance. Instead, she trusted time. But time does not always soften edges. Sometimes it sharpens them. When our father died unexpectedly, those patterns calcified. I became the one who handled things, bank appointments, funeral arrangements, paperwork no 19-year-old should have to understand. Daniel withdrew into a reckless grief masked as independence. Caroline slipped into drama, needing attention more than comfort. Mother leaned on me because I offered steadiness, but she never acknowledged what that load cost. As adults, our relationships grew more cordial but not closer. Holidays were polite, birthdays marked by automated messages. The distance felt manageable, even necessary. But when Mother's health began to decline, old roles resurfaced with suffocating clarity. I was the one who drove her to appointments. The one who cleaned her house. The one who stayed overnight when she felt weak. Daniel visited when it suited him, offering investment advice she didn't ask for. Caroline came with emotional theatrics that exhausted her more than they helped. Mother still loved them fiercely, no parent stops, but she confided her frustrations to me in rare moments of vulnerability. I don't blame them, she once sighed. I just wish they'd grown up. Her words echoed now as I thought about the estate disputes. After her death, her will became a proxy for every resentment my siblings had let simmer with age. They fought over jewelry she'd rarely worn, accused each other of influencing her decisions, and argued over property they hadn't touched in decades. I tried to remain neutral, believing fairness could calm their tempers. Instead, neutrality made them suspicious. You always think you know what she wanted, Caroline snapped one afternoon. But maybe she trusted us just as much. Daniel, ever strategic, added, "Yeah, Eleanor. Not everything is meant for you to control." Control. They loved using that word. As if responsibility were a crown I'd fought to claim rather than one that had been forced onto my head at 19. The more they argued, the clearer it became that this wasn't about grief. It was about entitlement. They each believed they deserved more, and that belief poisoned every interaction. Meanwhile, I kept hearing Mother's voice. Justice is truth with the courage to speak. I hadn't yet discovered her truth, but I sensed it looming. By the time the trustee revealed the existence of a second will, our family dynamic had deteriorated so badly that suspicion came naturally to them. Not empathy. Not curiosity. Suspicion. They wanted a villain to blame, and I was the simplest candidate. The irony, of course, is that I had no desire to fight them. Not then. Not before I read what Mother had written. All I wanted was peace, something our family had never mastered. But peace was not what my mother prepared me for. She had left a truth behind. And once revealed, it would force every one of us to confront the choices we'd made and the lies we'd believed. Especially them. The betrayal revealed itself gradually, like rot beneath floorboards. I had suspected something was wrong during the estate inventory, but I dismissed the unease, convincing myself that grief made everyone act strangely. It wasn't until I sat across from the trustee with the second will unopened between us that the truth finally unfurled. "Before you read this," he said, "you should know that your mother contacted me privately several months before her passing. She expressed concerns about certain financial irregularities." The word irregularities tightened something in my chest. What kind of irregularities? He gestured to the envelope. "She explains them here." Hands steady, I broke the seal. The letter inside was handwritten, her voice, her tone, unmistakable. She didn't waste words. She never had. "Eleanor, if you are reading this, then the concerns I shared with the trustee were indeed valid." The letter went on to outline a betrayal far deeper than I had imagined. Over the preceding 5 years, while helping Mother with various errands, Daniel had gained access to some of her accounts. At first, she believed he was assisting her. But small withdrawals became larger ones. A missing signature. A transfer she didn't recognize. When she confronted him gently, Mother was always gentle with him. He dismissed her concerns as memory lapses. He gaslit her. My brother. The boy who once asked me to fix his scraped knee. The man who now took advantage of her fading strength. But Daniel wasn't the only one. Caroline, though less calculating, had been quietly influencing Mother to gift her certain valuables, items worth thousands. Jewelry, antique pieces, valuables claimed under the guise of sentiment, only to be later listed online for sale. Mother had discovered one listing by accident. She hadn't confronted her, not directly. Instead, she documented everything. In neat handwriting, she explained the steps she had taken. Copies of bank statements. Screenshots of sale listings. Notebook entries with dates, times, conversations. A file with her attorney outlining what she suspected. My mother, frail, grieving, nearing the end of her life, had spent her last months gathering evidence. Protecting herself. Protecting me. And the second will. It was a correction. A rebalancing. A quiet justice. The letter ended not with bitterness, but with clarity. "You have carried the weight of this family far too long. This time, I am placing the responsibility in your hands not to burden you, but because you are the one who will use the truth wisely." I folded the letter with trembling hands. I didn't cry. I felt something heavier than tears, a grief sharpened by betrayal. I had defended my siblings for years, rationalized their behaviors, softened their failures. And all the while, they had been taking from the one person who loved them unconditionally. When the trustee explained the legal differences between the two wills, the allocation change, the protections added, the clauses specific to documented misconduct, I listened with a sinking mixture of sadness and resolve. My siblings had stolen not just money, not just property, but trust. They had preyed upon a woman who deserved better. That night, I drove home in silence, the road lit in fragments by passing headlights. I replayed decades of memories through a new lens. Daniel's dismissive tone, Caroline's dramatics, the way they always seemed to feel owed. Perhaps Mother had noticed all along. Perhaps that's why she entrusted me with the truth. The betrayal was no longer abstract. It had a paper trail, a legal footprint, a moral weight. And soon, they would have to face it. The moment I understood the depth of what Mother had uncovered, something inside me shifted. Not anger, at least not immediately, but purpose. Ethical revenge, if you could call it that, does not begin with rage. It begins with clarity. And my mother had handed me clarity in careful, deliberate handwriting. I began with the documents she'd compiled. The notebook chronicling unauthorized withdrawals. The printed bank statements with her notes in the margins. Screenshots of the jewelry Caroline had listed under a pseudonym but not cleverly enough to avoid detection. Receipts she had saved. Conversations she had transcribed in her aging but precise script. It was overwhelming, but it was also methodical. Evidence laid out by a woman who had spent her life bringing order to chaos. I met with the trustee and Mother's attorney together. They explained how the second will had been validated. How Mother's suspicions had been legally documented. How each change she made was supported by evidence. They had seen cases like this before, they said, but rarely with such care. Rarely with such dignity. I reviewed each page, each signature, each timestamp. I looked for weaknesses, inconsistencies, anything that could be contested. But Mother had been thorough. Painfully thorough. Even in her final months, she had gathered the strength to protect what mattered. My lawyer, a calm woman named Judith, helped me prepare. She guided me through legal procedures, potential challenges, and the likely reactions of my siblings. They will deny everything, Judith warned. Expect that. Entitlement often resists reality. I nodded. I knew them. Denial was a language they spoke fluently. But the truth was stronger. One by one, I assembled my case. I created a chronological file. Evidence of Daniel's unauthorized accessor, proof of Caroline's asset removal, a Mother's written statements and signed affidavits, the trustees' records of their conversations, the notarized second will. It felt less like building a case and more like honoring her final request. Use the truth wisely. At night, I sat at my kitchen table, papers spread before me, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. I felt Mother's presence in the quiet. Not haunting but guiding. As if she were reminding me that justice is not about vengeance, but correction. The day before the estate meeting, Judith asked, "Are you ready for what comes next?" "I'm ready to tell the truth," I said. She studied me for a moment. "Your siblings will try to paint you as the aggressor." "I know. And when they attack your character?" I breathed deeply. "I won't raise my voice. I won't fight them on their terms." Judith smiled faintly. "Good. Calm truth unsettles people who rely on chaos." My siblings had built their narratives on distortion and selective memory. They believed that louder voices win. They believed I would fold under pressure as I had in the past, playing the peacemaker, easing conflict at my own expense. But this time was different. I wasn't fighting for control. I was protecting my mother's final clarity, and my own integrity. As I organized the final documents into their folders, I realized something else. This was no longer about inheritance. It was about reclaiming the years I'd spent holding a family together while others pulled it apart. And tomorrow, they would learn that truth, quiet, unwavering truth, can be the most devastating force of all. The morning of the estate meeting, I woke before sunrise. The world was still, the kind of stillness that settles over a home before the weight of the day presses in. I brewed a pot of coffee, but my hands didn't shake. It struck me then. I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. For most of my life, I'd avoided confrontation. I'd believed that keeping peace required absorbing blows quietly. But somewhere in the days following Mother's letter, the idea had begun to loosen. Peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of truth. I dressed simply. A navy blouse, charcoal slacks, clothes that neither invited attention nor shrank from it. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman shaped by years of endurance, now standing firmly in a moment that demanded strength. The meeting room at the trustee's office was bright with natural light, but tension dulled its warmth. Daniel paced near the window, jaw clenched. Caroline sat with her arms folded, wearing the expression of someone preparing to perform outrage. They didn't greet me. The trustee called the session to order. Judith sat beside me, calm as a still lake. My siblings expected a procedural review of the estate. They expected to argue. They expected to win. They did not expect the truth. When the trustee announced the existence of a validated second will, Caroline gasped dramatically while Daniel laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. They both turned toward me, eyes blazing. "What did you do?" Daniel demanded. "Nothing," I said softly. "This was Mother's decision. She wouldn't do something like this," Caroline snapped. "Not without telling us." "She did tell you," I replied. "You just didn't hear her." The trustee unfolded the letter Mother had asked to be read aloud. Her handwriting appeared on the projection screen, serene and unmistakable. Her words filled the room. She explained her concerns about missing funds, unauthorized account access, removed property, and manipulative pressure. I watched my siblings' faces closely. Caroline went pale. Daniel stiffened. Denial flickered, but truth pressed harder. "This is ridiculous," Daniel shouted. She was confused at the end. Judith leaned forward. "The documentation includes dates when she was fully competent. Medical attestations confirm that. And the withdrawals," the trustee added. "They match your login credentials." For the first time, Daniel faltered. Caroline shook her head violently. "She gave me that jewelry. She wanted me to have it." The trustee tapped the folder gently. "She documented the conversation where she refused that request." Silence wrapped the room, dense and unavoidable. I knew this was the moment, the turning point. The place where I either retreated as I had all my life or stood in the truth she'd entrusted to me. I inhaled. Then I spoke. "I'm not here to punish either of you. I'm not here to humiliate you. I am here because Mother asked me to protect what mattered to her in the way she chose. She made her decisions clearly, legally, and with full understanding. This is not my doing. This is hers." They stared at me, no longer furious, just exposed. I continued. "You may deny what you did. You may try to twist it. But the evidence is in her handwriting, her signatures, her records. You took advantage of her. And now her decisions reflect that." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Calm truth," Judith had said, "unsettles people who rely on chaos." And indeed, my siblings had gone silent, not because they accepted responsibility, but because the foundation they'd built their anger upon had crumbled beneath them. In that moment, I understood that I had already won. Not the estate, not the argument, but the courage to defend what was rightfully mine. And what was rightfully hers. After the meeting, the shift in the air was palpable. My siblings filed out separately, avoiding each other as much as they avoided me. Their silence wasn't acceptance, it was strategy unraveling. Over the following weeks, the consequences unfolded quietly but decisively. Daniel tried first to regain control. He requested additional reviews, filed objections, and attempted to cast doubt on Mother's mental capacity during the months she documented his unauthorized withdrawals. Unfortunately for him, her physician's records were indisputable. She had been lucid, clear-minded, determined. In the end, she negotiated a settlement, transferring what remained of the stolen funds and liquidating assets to repay a portion of the loss. It wasn't everything. It never could be. But justice rarely arrives in a perfect shape. It arrives in a shape you can live with. And I could live with this. On the day her final payment was transferred, Lois sent me a letter. A short one. Just a single line: "I did what I thought I deserved." I stared at it, realizing the sentence revealed more than she intended. After the case settled, my life didn't transform overnight. Justice is not a magic wand, it's a recalibration. A return to balance. With the recovered funds, the restored trust, and the knowledge of what had been hidden from me for so long, I finally made choices without the shadow of scarcity. I renovated my kitchen. I purchased a small piece of land my mother once dreamed of owning. I funded scholarships at the local library. But more importantly, I exhaled in a way I hadn't in decades. One quiet morning, I sat on my porch with a cup of Earl Grey, watching the sunrise tint the sky soft gold. The world felt wide again, open, honest, unthreatened. I realized I had not only reclaimed my inheritance, I had reclaimed my narrative. My cousins reached out often. At first with guilt, then with something resembling genuine affection. They were navigating their own grief, a living mother whose legacy had fractured. I responded with compassion, but boundaries too. Healing does not require forgetting. As for Lois, she moved to a smaller home outside town. We did not speak again. Not out of hatred, but out of completion. Some relationships end long before the betrayal is discovered. In the quiet that followed the storm, I found myself reflecting on my mother. I wondered if she had sensed her sister's envy. If she had hoped I'd one day uncover the truth. Or if she simply believed the best in people until the very end. I visited her grave on a breezy autumn afternoon. The same kind of afternoon she always loved. I placed fresh dahlias beside her stone and sat on the cool grass. "I found what you left me," I said softly. "And I'm taking good care of it now." The wind stirred, gentle but present, and I let myself believe she heard me. Walking back to my car, I felt a peace I had not known since my youth. Not a naive peace, but a seasoned one. A peace shaped by clarity, by resilience, by the knowledge that justice had been reclaimed without bitterness consuming me. The truth had not destroyed me. It had refined me. That evening, while organizing some old family boxes, I found a sealed envelope addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. I had never seen it before. I opened the envelope with careful hands. The paper inside was yellowed but intact, my mother's handwriting looping gently across the page. "My Evelyn," it began. "If you are reading this, it means time has moved forward in a way I cannot. I want you to remember one truth above all others. Trust the quiet voice inside you. It may whisper, but it never lies." I paused, swallowing the weight of her words. "I have left you resources to build the life you deserve," the letter continued. "I cannot predict what others will do with their own fears or desires. But I know your heart. I know your strength. And I know you will find your way if the road ever bends." At the bottom was a single sentence that felt like a gift delivered across decades. "You are more powerful than anyone realizes." I folded the letter and held it to my chest, the final confirmation that my mother had known who I would grow to be. A woman who does not shout to be heard. A woman who does not break when betrayed. A woman who understands that revenge rooted in truth is not revenge at all, but restoration. As I sit here now, sharing this story, I offer the lesson it carved into me. Justice doesn't require rage. Truth doesn't require permission. And peace doesn't require reconciliation. It requires clarity. People may betray you quietly, subtly, over years so long you stop noticing the erosion. But documentation, patience, and courage can rebuild what was stolen in silence. When someone lies to you, they fear your strength. When you uncover the lie, you reclaim it. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply living the life they tried to take from you. So if you find yourself doubting a feeling, a discrepancy, a memory that won't sit still, listen to it. Investigate. Document. Ask questions. Calm confrontation can move mountains more effectively than anger ever could. My story is not about money. It's about the restoration of self. And in the end, the truth didn't just expose my aunt's deception. It illuminated my mother's faith in me. Faith that waited 27 years to be found. If you've stayed with me through this journey, then take this with you. When the world insists you accept a lie, hold steadfast to your quiet knowing. Because even dormant truth eventually demands to be seen. Ethical revenge, if I can even call it that, is never about harm. It's about clarity. It's about allowing truth to stand without apology. It's about refusing to shrink so others can stay comfortable in their distortions. For most of my life, I believed that silence prevented conflict. I believed that being the eldest meant carrying burdens without complaint. But truth asks more of us. It asks for courage, not compliance. It asks us to speak even when our voices are soft. It asks us to step into the light, even when shadows feel safer. My mother understood this better than I ever realized. Her second will was not an act of favoritism. It was an act of justice, a final attempt to correct a balance long skewed by entitlement. She believed I would do what was right. She believed I would protect the truth even if it came at personal cost. I hope, wherever she is, she knows that I tried. In the months since, I've learned that closure doesn't come from seeing others fall. It comes from reclaiming the parts of yourself you abandoned to keep others afloat. I reclaimed my peace, my dignity, my voice. And if there is one message I offer to anyone listening, it is this. Do not confuse being the quiet one with being the weak one. Do not mistake patience for passivity. Do not underestimate the strength of a person who has spent a lifetime holding others together. Because when that person finally stands up, calm, steady, resolute, they do not rise in anger. They rise in truth. And truth, once spoken, does not tremble. As for my siblings, life continues for them in quieter tones. They carry their consequences not as punishments, but as mirrors. Whether they choose to look into those mirrors is no longer my responsibility. My responsibility now is to live, to breathe, to savor mornings on the porch, warm cups of tea, books that wait patiently for me to open them. To honor my mother not by holding on to the pain of her last months, but by embracing the wisdom she left behind. Justice does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it is nothing more than a second will tucked into an envelope, addressed to the one person quiet enough to hear what the truth has been trying to say. My mother trusted me with that truth. And in the end, that trust, more than the house, more than the inheritance, more than the reckoning, is the greatest gift she ever left me.